Good evening and welcome to another episode of Hope at Night. Is paranormal activity real, or do people just have overactive imaginations? Years ago, I met some new neighbors. We began talking and they informed me the former owners still lived in the house. Well, that didn't make any sense since the former owners had recently passed away. But they shared that they would hear them at night going up and down the stairs. They said that they were big-time smokers too, and they would see cigarette smoke clouds moving through the air. So does the supernatural world exist? Is it something to embrace or something to fear? And how much power does it really have? Today we have someone who is going to help us answer that question. He has gone from communicating with spirits at the foot of his bed each night to now serving as a lay pastor and talking to the God of heaven throughout each day. Please welcome to Hope at Night, Jace Addison. I'm glad you're here. Jace, so you grew up going to church. Mm-hmm. Why in the world did you leave your church as you got older?
Yeah, so as a kid, I had some supernatural experiences that were relatively minor than what I faced later on in life. But those, coupled with the fact that as I was going into high school, I learned more about the theory of evolution, and I was starting to get an interest in partying and drinking and doing all that kind of stuff. I started to see less and less need of a God in my life. So eventually, whenever I was in the middle of high school, I refused to go to church anymore.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you begin to drift away from the church, if that sounds right?
Yes.
And you were attracted to things of the world, the partying, the lifestyle, all that stuff.
Yes.
But eventually, you began to be attracted to spiritualism.
Yes.
Can you break that down for us?
Yeah, so when I was a child, I had these supernatural experiences that, though I learned about the theory of evolution, those supernatural experiences as a kid couldn't allow me to just embrace this idea that there's nothing else out there than what meets the eyes, a purely unsupernatural look at the world. So I started to study into other religions because I didn't think Christianity was the way, because I didn't really see practical Christianity lived out in my life, and nor did I see a reason to believe in the Bible.
So if I get this right, you still felt that longing for spirituality.
Yes.
You just didn't find it in the church
Yes.
at that time. Okay.
Yes, so I started to study into the religions of Native Americanism, shamanism, Buddhism, and Hinduism. And as I was studying, I learned how these different religions could actually harmonize pretty well with the theory of evolution. The theory of evolution has a teaching that when successive generations repeat one after another, they get more and more advanced. And it's kind of an open-ended question what the theory of evolution leaves it to, but these other religions kind of filled in that question for me. They say after successive lives and reincarnations, or however you want to view it, we eventually become gods.
Right.
And so I thought, whoa, so these religions are harmonizing with the science that I was learning in high school, and it's answering the open-ended question. So I started to study into those religions and learning about this whole idea of becoming a God. Mind you, I never understood what the Bible said about, what the serpent said to Eve back in Genesis chapter 3. So I just went on with it.
What was the devil's first lie to Eve?
One is, you shall not surely die. The second one was that you will be as gods, knowing good and evil. So as weird as it sounds, that was my course of study. As I went into college, I started to study into how to become a god. Now that sounds really weird, but I ended up coming across the books by Aleister Crowley. For those who don't know, Aleister Crowley was labeled the most wicked man of the 18th century, and he was the advisor for Antony LaVey, who was the founder of the Church of Satan later in the 19th century. So I read his books, and I learned that there were these beings, these spiritual beings that some people call them demons, some people call them spirits. Basically, they want to help us get to that point where we can become gods. And I said, oh, well, that sounds pretty useful.
So you begin to explore some of this literature and embrace some of this philosophy of ascending into gods,
Yes.
right?
Yes, I did.
What supernatural experiences did you begin to have at this time?
Well, there was a lot of supernatural experiences before I started reading his books. I would get into astral projections, which is basically out-of-body experiences. I would do a lot of meditation and getting into trances through different music styles that I was listening to. But whenever I started reading his books, he would detail rituals that could be done to contact these spirit beings. And to be honest, I thought that some of his rituals were overcomplicated. And I thought, if these spirit beings want to talk to me, they'll talk to me. So I did a simplified version of his ritual, and that night there was 3 beings in the exact description that he laid out in his book that appeared before the foot of my bed, and we talked. And
was this during a dream? Was this during a trance?
I was awake.
Okay.
I was awake during this time. And so as I was talking to these beings, the reason I communicated to them is because I said I had questions and I wanted answers. And I thought that these would be some good people to talk to. And a lot of people ask me, weren't you scared during this time? I actually was more comfortable talking to them than a lot of people in my life. They were very friendly, very, very comforting to be around during that time of my life. And that's really a lesson to be learned, is just because something is evil doesn't necessarily mean that it has to make you feel uncomfortable. Right. So as I started communicating with them after that night, I was able to ask them questions about different things that I had throughout the day. And the answers would come to me either through impressions. Sometimes there would be audible voices that would tell me the answer, or other times they would just set up circumstances perfectly to where I would study something out and learn more about the questions that I had.
So the interactions that were taking place between you and these spirit beings, how long did that last for?
Just around 1.5 years.
With all of this that was taking place, what led you back to God?
So as I progressed more in talking to these beings, there was a lot of changes that took place in my life. I became healthier because they taught me about different aspects of health and what foods to avoid, what foods to embrace.
So your life was literally being influenced and shaped by the communications you were having by these spirit beings. Okay.
Yes. From the food that I ate to the music I listened to, I stopped watching television at that time because they were informing me to get me more receptive to their influence. I needed to start cutting media out of my life. I needed to live a more simple lifestyle. And that's something that's pretty common in the New Age, is that you'll find, along with the New Age, this emphasis of
minimalism,
plant-based lifestyles, veganism, all that kind of stuff. And I was embracing it all to the T. I did.
Jace, it doesn't seem like they had a negative influence on your life. It seems fairly positive.
It seems positive, but I think the most dangerous poison isn't the poison that's in the veil that says poison. I think the poison that's the most dangerous is the one that's in your food. And it's something that's mixed with truth. So as I was really learning all that they had to offer me, the mindset of becoming a god was being strengthened. And even though there was physical benefits, and there was mental benefits, there was a lot of unforeseen danger that I was embracing in my life.
Wow. How did you come back to Jesus?
Yes, so that's a great question. As I talked to the demons more, they offered me more and more, to the point where they said, you can have whatever you want. You can have all the money, you can have all the fame. You can have all the pleasures of this world that you want, but we want a commitment out of you. And by this time, I had seen so much suffering that their system had brought upon people that I didn't want anything to do with it. And I knew that was the Holy Spirit working in my life at that time, because naturally, my selfish heart would want everything that they were offering, even if it was at the expense of other people. So for about 6 months straight, I really was having a hard spiritual time. At first, the demons, whenever I talked to them, they were very comfortable to be around, but then they started appearing into forms that terrified me really bad. Sometimes they would appear before me and my girlfriend at the time. Other times they would appear before me and a group of friends. And I guess that was the most awakening time that I knew I was in trouble, is that I couldn't just say, oh, it's my mind at this point, because there was other people seeing the exact same things that I was seeing.
Wow.
And that really scared me in the time.
So you started, the experience became negative. It went from being positive to become more negative, more harassing. Continue. What led you away from that eventually?
So what led me away from it was that one day I had it up to here with all the stress that I was being put under, and I went home and I talked to my girlfriend. I said, if I go any further in this line, I'm going to pass away. And she said, if we give our lives to God, He'll protect us. And I thought, what? Like, that was the first time she ever brought up God into our relationship. That was the first time I actually thought about God in years. And I thought, I realized that He was protecting me, because there were times in that 6-month period especially that I should have passed away. But I didn't, because in the right moment, something would work out perfectly where I wouldn't get into that auto accident. I wouldn't get into other dangerous situations, and I would escape scot-free. So then I realized not only was God protecting me in the time whenever I didn't know Him, and in fact the only time I was talking about Him was in cursing, but He was protecting me to get me to that point to make an intellectual decision whether to serve Him or to not.
So if I'm understanding this right, during that 6-month period you were in contact with these spirits, you were also experiencing some very dangerous things.
Yes,
and you,
very much so.
You sensed, in retrospect, God had been preserving your life through it all.
Yes, yes.
Would you be able to describe what one of these experiences were?
Yeah, so one of these experiences was multiple times what would happen is I would be driving down the road and someone would swerve into my lane, and it was going to be a head-on collision, and I would hardly be paying attention some of the times because I'd be messing with my radio at that exact time. And then it was like something grabbed my hand and moved the steering wheel and made me avoid that car. Wow. Or usually it had to do with auto accidents, because really, if you want to take someone out, I think causing an auto accident is probably the most effective way. Right. But that's an example of some of the things that were happening. But eventually, I started realizing that God was preserving my life through this. And I realized that when I wasn't serving God, God was seeking my best. When I wasn't serving the demons and doing what they wanted me to do, well, they were just scaring me half to death. And I started comparing what they were like to what God was like, and I was like, who wouldn't want to serve God? Right. If He's treating people like me with kindness and with care to get us to the point to come to Him, why would I go to the other side and be scared all the time and be forced into submission? So that night in 2018, I gave my life to God.
Wow, that's not too long ago.
No,
Oh.
Just over 5 years.
Well, what happened after that?
Well, things got harder. Things got much harder, but I had someone to lean on.
Did you still experience supernatural things afterwards?
Yeah, for quite a few months afterwards, I started to have more intense supernatural experiences on the bad side, but
So it became more, you sense more negative spiritual experiences. Okay.
yeah. But at the same time, I was having positive spiritual experiences whenever I was studying God's Word, whenever I was praying. But I guess the demons knew that I was coming to God, so they wanted to double down on their efforts.
Sounds like a very fierce battle was taking place.
It was pretty rough.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what have you been up to since that time?
Yeah, so shortly after I became a Christian again, I started to go to a little school called Washita Hills College in Arkansas, and I studied biblical studies there. I graduated and now am functioning as a lay pastor of my hometown church.
Wonderful.
Which is really strange because I was the black sheep of the town, but now I'm a pastor in that same town, and it's just really amazing to see God working in that.
That is amazing, the way that God changes and transforms our